The story begins with a man named John, whose daughters warn him that someone is in the house. Ignoring their concern, John checks the house, treating it like a game. Suddenly, people in the house attack him. One of the attackers, named Luc, kills John's wife and then his daughter. The scene shifts to a hospital where we meet John again. The doctor tells him he's been in a coma for 9 months and introduces John to an FBI agent. The FBI agent asks John about the accident that killed his family, but his memory is fuzzy, except for the date of the tragedy. The FBI agent then shows him a photo of Luc, a former soldier turned traitor, and leaves him with a card. After a call from the same FBI agent, a plumber is activated. We see a character named Magnus, who starts acting strangely and vomits. He then drives his truck. John, meanwhile, leaves the hospital and heads home, filled with sadness as he remembers his family. Later, Magnus is seen at a strip club, where he kills an old lady and moves on to kill several more people. A powerful man named UniSol confronts him, but Magnus kills him with a 100-ton shot. Magnus eventually reaches a courtroom where he fights a character named Scott. During the fight, Scott injects Magnus with a serum, taking control of him. Under Scott's command, Magnus is told he's now free but must fight for them and against the government. After this, John gets a call from a person named Dr. Isaac, who introduces himself as John's friend and asks to meet him at home. However, John doesn't remember anything, including his name. Later, the doctor gives him the address of his house. When John arrives at his home, he finds a brutally murdered body. Nearby, he discovers a photo of himself, raising more questions. He also sees a recorder, which he takes with him as he leaves. John plays the recorder, and it reveals details about a uniform and how a doctor can prepare something quickly for him. After this, John follows the clues from the card he received and goes to a bar. There, he meets a girl named Sarah. John tries to ask her questions, but she ignores him. John steps outside, but Magnus suddenly appears and injects John with a serum, similar to the one used on him. This causes John to start transforming into someone like Magnus. Unable to defeat him, John is thrown out and left in poor condition. John heads back home, but Magnus attacks him again. During the fight, Magnus cuts off John's fingers. With the help of Sarah, John manages to fight back, cutting off Magnus's leg. After this, we see Scott, who is inspiring many soldiers and people like Magnus to fight for their freedom. We learn that these soldiers are now in a battle against the government, seeking to liberate themselves. Afterward, we see John and Sarah. Sarah reveals that John and Sarah had once been in love. John used to drive a truck, and they didn't live in a typical house, but in a small cabin by the river. Hearing this confuses John, as he doesn't remember any of it. Later, John contacts the Gorman and tells him that he is witnessing things happening in real time. He informs him that he suspects Luc is behind everything, but he is unsure of his connection to all of it. Then we see Magnus, whose leg, which had been severely damaged, is now almost fully healed. This happens just as he engages in a fight with a soldier. During the fight, there is an explosion of gas, and after the soldier is injured, he robs the soldier and kills him. With the help of Sarah, John finds his way to a company where he used to deliver goods by truck. He meets a man named Larry, and John asks him for a delivery address. However, Larry denies having any information and says only someone called Mr. Ron can provide it. John then meets Mr. Ron, who doesn't seem to want to give clear answers. Frustrated, John shows Mr. Ron a photo of Luc, asking if he knows him. Mr. Ron tells John to leave, claiming that Luc is his superior. Finally, Mr. Ron admits that John's things have been lying with them for a long time, leaving John with more questions than answers. John becomes suspicious of everything happening around him. However, as John delves deeper, he finds out that he was the one who killed his own friend. Isaac has been killed. As Mr. Ron shows him the tapes. Confused and horrified by this revelation, John begins to question his reality and his role in the series of violent events unfolding before him. John then goes to Sarah, asking her for the address of the place where he had once stayed with Sarah. Sarah had been an important figure in John's life, and he hoped that revisiting the past would provide him with some answers. However, before John can make any progress, he is attacked by Magnus, who has been hunting him for some time. As the battle between John and Magnus escalates, their fight spills into a store. Both men put up a fierce fight, and it becomes clear that they are evenly matched. For a while, it seems like neither of them will gain the upper hand. However, after a grueling exchange, John finally gets the opportunity he needs. With a baseball bat in hand, John strikes Magnus with all his might, tearing through him. In the end, Magnus is killed, and John is left standing victorious. Despite his victory, John is left deeply troubled. Over the years, he has endured countless injuries and battles, yet he notices that his severed fingers are starting to regenerate, almost as if by magic. This strange occurrence only adds to John's growing sense of unease. He begins to feel like something is fundamentally wrong with him, that there are parts of his past and identity that have been hidden from him. Determined to uncover the truth, John heads to a location that Sarah tells him where the cabin is, where he encounters another version of himself, another John. This other John reveals a shocking secret. Years ago, John had killed Drive Isaac, a scientist who had been keeping a close watch on him. John had been working for the government at the time, but somewhere along the way, things went wrong. The other John explains that UniSol, a shadowy organization, had recruited John into their ranks, promising him power and knowledge in return for his loyalty. The truth begins to unravel. John learns that the government has used him for their purposes, and he has been manipulated by the same people he once trusted. He had been a tool, a puppet, in a much larger game. Now, with this newfound knowledge, John begins to realize the full extent of his situation. The organization had given him a serum, similar to the one given to Magnus, which had enhanced his abilities but also bound him to their control. In a desperate attempt to reclaim his freedom, John fights back against the forces that have been manipulating him. He remembers the man who had told him about the truck deliveries, the same man who had once belonged to John's inner circle. This person had been instrumental in pulling John deeper into the web of lies and deceit that had surrounded him for so long. Now, John resolves to confront this figure and put an end to the manipulation once and for all. As John's quest for answers continues, he faces a new threat in the form of Scott, who attempts to kill him. In a heated confrontation, John manages to escape death once again when another figure, Zone, shoots Scott before she can finish the job. With Scott dead, Zone helps John remove a device that had been implanted in him by the organization, a device that had been tracking and controlling his actions all along. John, now free from the organization's influence, contacts Sarah and urges her to leave before the situation gets any more dangerous. He knows that their enemies will not stop until both of them are eliminated. After ensuring Sarah's safety, John finds himself standing by the riverbank, waiting for a uniform that would allow him to blend in and continue his fight in secret. He reflects on the strange journey he has been on and recalls the words of the real John, the other version of himself, who had told him that only through this path could he confront and meet Luc, a key figure in the organization. In time, John is taken to a secret base where he meets Dr. Sue, a scientist who finally reveals the full truth to him. Dr. Sue explains that John had only been created a few weeks ago, and everything he thought he knew about his past had been implanted in his mind through a sophisticated program. The painful memories, the losses, the betrayals, all of it had been fabricated to keep John in line, to make him believe that he was fighting for a cause when, in reality, he was just another pawn in the organization's game. With this revelation, John is left to grapple with the enormity of the truth. His entire life, as he knew it, was a lie. The people he thought he knew, the battles he fought, they were all part of an elaborate construct designed to control him. The pain has grown unbearable, and it begins to affect him deeply. This triggers John to lash out, and in his rage, he starts to eliminate all the units present around him. As John fights through the chaos, he eventually comes face to face with Luc, one of the government's powerful agents. What follows is an intense battle between John and Luc. They exchange gunfire and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Both are skilled fighters, and the clash is nothing short of extraordinary. However, after a fierce fight, John manages to kill Luc. But there's a twist: this was not the real Luc. Instead, it was just a clone, a decoy sent to test John. The real Luc is still out there, and only someone with the backing him, another key figure in the government's plan, can truly defeat him. John starts to remember his family and the people he lost, and this memory fuels him. Another soldier who had been serving the government recognizes John's strength and bows before him, signaling respect and submission. With Gorman defeated, John goes to report the outcome to the government. But when he arrives, he is hit with another devastating truth: the entire meeting with the government, and everything that had happened to John, was all part of a carefully crafted plan. The government reveals that they had designed John with one purpose: to kill Luc. Just like Luc, another soldier before him, John was created with the memory of his family's tragic death as a way to drive him toward revenge. The government planned to use John's grief to turn him into the perfect weapon, to push him to eliminate their enemies. Luc, their earlier creation, had failed to complete the task, and so John was brought into existence to finish what Luc could not. The memory of John's family was nothing more than a tool, a manipulation designed to make John do their bidding. Upon hearing this, John is overwhelmed with anger and betrayal. He had been used, tricked into believing that his family's death was the driving force behind his actions, only to discover it was all a lie. Enraged, John decides to take matters into his own hands. He turns on the government agents who had orchestrated everything and, in a fit of righteous fury, shoots and kills the government leader responsible for the whole plan. But the story doesn't end there. As soon as the government official falls dead, his son, who had been in John's van all along, steps out. The young man, who had also been caught up in the government's web of lies and manipulation, bows his head in front of John as a sign of respect and walks away. This gesture signifies the passing of the torch. John, having defeated Luc and exposed the truth behind the government schemes, is now left to continue the fight. The war against the corrupt government is far from over, and John's journey is only just beginning. As the movie comes to a close, the audience learns that Luc, the original soldier, had managed to escape after being regenerated. This sets up the possibility of future conflict. Drive. Sandra, a key scientist in the government's operations, had always feared that if Luc were to return, it would be impossible to stop him. Now that Luc has fled, it seems that her worst fears are coming true. The government is on the brink of collapse, as the soldiers they once controlled have turned against them. With their soldiers now fighting for freedom, the government's power is slipping, and their grip on control is weakening. After many failed attempts to stop the rebellion, the government created John, hoping that he would succeed where Luc had failed. And while John did manage to kill Luc, he ultimately realized that he was nothing more than a pawn in the government's plans. The entire movie is about John's journey towards self-awareness, uncovering the truth about his past, and breaking free from the control of those who had manipulated him. In the end, John's victory over the government is bittersweet. He has avenged his family, but he has also uncovered the dark truth behind his existence. The final shot leaves the audience wondering what the future holds for John as he walks away from the wreckage of his former life, ready to continue the fight against the system that created him. And that wraps up today's story. A tale of revenge, betrayal, and self-discovery. John's fight is far from over, and the battle for freedom continues. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button to show your support, drop a comment to let us know what you think, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more in-depth stories and thrilling breakdowns like this. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and as always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.